What's up again, guys? It's Griff Neilson, your holistic lifestyle hacker, and we are going to continue with my favorite book at the moment. Actually, this is one I read a little while back. It's called The End of Overeating, and we've been talking about food addiction and how it's real and why we get addicted to food. And today is very interesting because in the last video, I mentioned that there is this feedback mechanism that is flat out not working, okay? Now, why is it not working? That's the question that I ended off with. And I want to share real quick a paragraph. Again, I'm sharing literally 2 to 3 chapters. We'll get through a whole book in a week, and I'm hoping you're enjoying this. He says, another study demonstrated the power of the reward system, remember, in the brain. So when we see something or a food and we taste it, it gives us a reward. It shoots down that from the nucleus, comes and gives us endorphins, essentially. So dopamine to endorphins. Food was placed at the far end of a room with an electrified floor that delivered an unpleasant shock. Now, this is rat studies, keep in mind. Animals had to walk across the floor to reach their food. The strength of that shock stopped an animal that hadn't eaten for a while from walking across the floor to obtain food. Under normal circumstances, hunger did not provide enough motive to act, given the consequences. Stimulate the reward centers, remember we were just talking about, stimulate the reward centers though, and the result was just the opposite. Now this is huge. Even an animal that was not hungry was willing to cross the electrical floor in order to secure a reward. Now, the question is, why are we overeating? Why are we eating even when we're not hungry? Why are we addicted literally to these modern day highly processed foods? Well, this comes down into a concept known as palatability. Okay, and this is what's happening. Remember, just to rephrase, we have this pleasure center in our brain, and when we take in a food that is, quote, palatable, let's say, for example, we're in the wild and we get some figs, or maybe we strike the mother lode and we find a pineapple in the tropics, okay? And we eat that, and when we eat that, we get a literal burst of dopamine. Remember, our hypothalamus says this is a good thing. It goes through different parts of our brain. Ultimately, it hits the basal part of our brain, the nucleus accumbens, where it shoots out dopamine, gives us endorphins, and says this is good, okay? Now, here's where palatability goes awry. And here's what we have done in our modern society to take something that is very natural, such as palatability, taking this pineapple, eating it, eating the figs or the nuts and the berries out in the wild, and our brain reinforcing that, saying it's good, right? So if we have this pleasure range, okay, and there's low pleasure here and high pleasure here, what happens is when we have the pineapple, it surges it up. The brain says this is good. It stays right there, but it doesn't go above this upper limit of pleasure, okay? Now, 2018, we have literal scientists sitting in a room being paid high 6-figure salaries to figure out how to scientifically engineer a food to make it what scientists have now termed hyper-palatable. So Mother Nature gives us palatable foods, right? I can have a food like the pineapple or the berries or honey from a hive, and it tastes really good, but it's not hyper-palatable. It doesn't go across that upper barrier. When it goes above this upper barrier of pleasure, that is what is known as hyper-palatability. And the brain is like, wow, holy crap, I just had this major blast of dopamine and endorphins, and I feel good, right? Let's say, check me on this. Let's say, for example, you've got a headache and you like soda pop. What's the first thing you do? You go for the soda pop. Why? Because you want that endorphin rush, and that is what gets you addicted. Hyperpalatability is what science is showing that gets us addicted to foods and to these highly processed foods. But here's the catch. We don't get addicted to foods in nature. Nature literally constructs foods in a way that they're not hyperpalatable. They're palatable, they taste really good, but they're not hyperpalatable. It's not dysregulating the chemistry in our brains. It's not going over the top. And that, my friends, is the difference. When we take something that has been scientifically designed to take us into hyper levels of pleasure, the body's like, yeah, I want more of that. More, please. Come on, now. And that's all we can think about. We get obsessed about it. Well, unfortunately, look at the obesity epidemic. 2/3 of us in this country right now are either overweight or obese. And by the way, this is why this is happening. This is why I'm sharing this. I want to give you an insight as to why this is happening and ultimately what to do about it. So, hyperpalatability, we're going to get into this a little bit more. Hope you're enjoying your reading time. Remember to never excuse away that inner greatness. And always remember, life is good. We'll see you in the next video.